They called it a closed briefing. There was nothing truly closed about a room arranged for judgment. The auditorium at the Academy in Colorado was windowless, concrete-walled, intentionally cold. The air carried the dry metallic scent of filtered ventilation. Rows of officers sat in graduated tiers, uniforms pressed, ribbons aligned, faces composed into disciplined neutrality. Rank insignia caught the fluorescent light in brief, hard flashes. I stood at the front beside a projection screen displaying the title I had written myself, Operation Iron Mirage. 3 weeks earlier, I had submitted the exposure through official channels, procurement anomalies, phantom vendors routed through layered shell corporations, asset transfers masked as training simulations. The pattern had been quiet but consistent. Money and material redirected through a classified archive facility in Nevada, then reclassified under strategic exemptions. I did not speculate. I documented. Timestamp clusters, clearance overlaps, signature drift across encrypted entries, the kind of misalignment that does not occur by accident. They thanked me for my diligence. Then they scheduled this briefing. I knew something was wrong when I walked in and saw him seated in the first row, Major Victor Callahan. My father did not look at me at first. He sat straight-backed, hands folded loosely in his lap, uniform immaculate. The silver at his temples reflected the overhead light. His posture communicated patience, authority, control. To anyone else, he was an officer who had built his reputation on discipline and discretion. To me, he was a man who believed correction was love and silence was loyalty. The commandant introduced me with a tone that felt measured, almost cautious. Captain Hale will clarify certain discrepancies related to the Iron Mirage exposure. Clarify. The word carried implication. I connected my tablet to the console. The screen shifted from black to data. My slides populated in orderly progression. Timeline access points, archive replication routes, financial divergence markers. I began. Initial irregularity detected in mirrored storage logs. Nevada Facility Archive Node, clearance tier delta between requester and executor. My voice did not rise or fall. It did not need to. Facts hold their own weight. The room listened. Halfway through the third slide, my father stood. He did not ask permission. "Before she continues," he said, his voice smooth and amplified without effort, "the board deserves full context." I turned my head slightly, not fully, just enough to acknowledge sound without surrendering position. He stepped forward into the open space near the aisle. "What you're looking at," he continued, gesturing toward my data, "is a reconstruction based on compromised credentials." A faint ripple moved through the officers. Not shock, interest. I advanced the slide. System authentication logs filled the display. Timestamp, I said evenly. Cross-reference at 0217 hours. Archive mirror access initiated from internal clearance node. My father smiled faintly. "Yes," he said, "that mirror. The one accessed under your digital signature." The word signature landed harder than accusation. It implied authorship. The commandant leaned forward. "Major Callahan, are you alleging—" "I am stating," my father replied, calm and precise, "that the breach which triggered this so-called exposure originated from Captain Hale's clearance key." The room became very still. I folded my hands behind my back. "Is there a formal allegation, Major?" I asked. He met my eyes. "Yes." No anger, no hesitation. "The digital trail is clean, too clean," he continued. "Every irregularity she identified stems from her own authentication stream. Her key initiated the Nevada archive access. Her key rerouted the files. Her key triggered the alert." He paused. "Orchestrating a breach and then exposing it as discovery is not unprecedented." A few officers shifted in their seats, ambition disguised as integrity. The narrative had been prepared. The commandant straightened. "Captain Hale, Pending internal review, you are relieved of investigative authority effective immediately. Your clearance is temporarily suspended. Relieved. The word is always chosen carefully. 2 military police officers entered the room. They did not touch me. They did not need to. I removed my access badge and placed it on the table beside the console. The click of plastic against metal echoed louder than it should have. My father did not look triumphant. He looked certain. Certainty is more dangerous. Operation Iron Mirage, he said, addressing the room rather than me, was a protective measure. National security sometimes requires discretion beyond personal ambition. Personal ambition? I inclined my head slightly as if acknowledging instruction. Inside, I began organizing memory. Because 2 nights earlier, at 0143 hours, a background alert had appeared in my secured log stream. Concealed access initiated. Classified archive facility, Nevada. Not from my terminal, not from my physical location. The access request had been masked within routine replication noise, buried beneath legitimate system pings. Someone had activated a dormant credential shadow layered beneath my clearance tier. Someone who understood infrastructure. Someone who knew the review board would see only the surface path. As the MPs escorted me from the stage, I kept my pace even. The doors closed behind me with controlled finality. Outside, the Colorado air was thin and sharp. The academy grounds stretched wide and orderly under a pale sky. Cadets moved in formation in the distance, boots striking pavement in synchronized rhythm. Structure, precision, predictability. I walked to my vehicle without haste. Suspension, internal review, sabotage. The words would already be moving through encrypted channels attached to my name. In the reflection of the windshield, I studied my own face. No visible reaction. Years in service teach you that reaction is leverage, and leverage, once exposed, is taken. I started the engine. Before my clearance fully collapsed across the system, I opened the secure log copy I had archived offline. I did not search for my name. I searched for absence. Because manipulation does not reveal itself through noise. It reveals itself through gaps. At 0143 hours, the concealed access node had activated from a credential layer nested beneath my clearance. The encryption hash aligned with a legacy protocol, no longer in active rotation. Legacy. My father had overseen system transitions during that protocol era. I scrolled further. The activation predated the scheduling of the briefing by 48 hours, which meant the accusation had been constructed after the trap was armed, which meant this hearing had not been reactive. It had been staged. I drove away from the academy as the sun dropped lower behind the mountains. If the digital trail pointed to me, there were only 2 possibilities. Either I had been careless, or someone had used my credentials with deliberate precision. I do not make careless mistakes. The Nevada facility had mirrored archive capacity. Most officers knew it only as a redundancy site. Very few knew it also housed sealed legacy records predating oversight reforms. Operation Iron Mirage had touched that archive. Someone had accessed it before I ever stepped into the auditorium. Someone had ensured the logs would point to me, and that someone understood both systems and spectacle. As the highway opened ahead of me, steady and controlled, I allowed one memory to surface. My father teaching me to disassemble and reassemble a mechanical watch when I was 12. Every system leaves a trace, he had said. Even when you think you've cleaned it. He had taught me to look for dust where it should not settle. He had forgotten I learned. The review board would examine surface logs. They would see my signature. They would see my clearance. They would not examine the dormant credential shadow unless prompted, and I would not prompt them yet, not without proof that could not be reframed as ambition. I turned off the highway toward temporary lodging assigned during suspension. The accusation had been delivered publicly, by blood. The concealed access had been activated deliberately, before the hearing began. This was not about a breach. It was about containment, and containment implies something worth protecting. Operation Iron Mirage had been described as a shield. Shields are rarely raised without threat. The question was not whether I had been set up. The question was what my father believed he was protecting. Tell me if the pacing holds. Suspension formalized at 1800 hours. Clearance tier reduced to administrative access only. My terminal privileges collapsed one layer at a time. External communication flagged. Internal correspondence redirected through oversight. They were efficient. I did not contest it. In the temporary quarters assigned to officers under review, the walls were the same neutral gray as any other facility, but the air felt different. Contained, observed, a desk, a narrow bed, a single locked cabinet. I placed my bag on the desk and powered on my private system. The copy of the logs I had extracted before deactivation loaded in silence. The fabricated trail was meticulous. Every manipulated entry bore my digital signature. Every timestamp aligned with my work schedule. Even the keystroke cadence embedded in authentication pulses had been mirrored. Someone had not only used my credentials, they had studied my patterns. I zoomed into the 0143 Nevada activation. The visible layer showed my clearance-initiating archive access. Beneath it, in the raw hexadecimal stream, something misaligned, a microsecond variance between authentication request and encryption acknowledgement, too small for a review board, not small enough for me. I isolated the variance and overlaid legacy protocol documentation from 12 years earlier. The handshake sequence did not match current standards. It matched Blackthorn architecture, my mother's architecture. Dr. Eliza Hale had designed transitional encryption safeguards during the post-coup reforms a decade ago, a quiet measure inserted into the system after an internal intelligence faction attempted to redirect classified assets through private contractors. The public never knew the details. I did. She had called it the Blackthorn Cipher, a dormant failsafe woven beneath clearance tiers, designed to detect internal manipulations masked as authorized transfers. It did not trigger alerts. It recorded truth in fragments, scattered across redundant nodes, only reassembled through a secondary key, her key. When she died, the project was sealed, officially retired. But she had once shown me a notebook filled with hash seeds and offset equations. "In case I'm not here," she had said, not looking at me when she said it. At the time, I thought it was theoretical. Now I wasn't sure. I decrypted the Nevada log fragment through the Blackthorn seed pattern I remembered. The first attempt failed. The second attempt produced a partial string. The third attempt revealed a buried authentication origin. Major Victor Callahan, not his current clearance. A preserved executive override from the transitional era. He had not simply redirected my credentials. He had nested his authority beneath mine, shielded Iron Mirage behind my signature. If the operation remained intact, I would appear guilty. If I exposed it, the trail would circle back to me. Elegant. I leaned back in the chair and let the implications settle without expression. Operation Iron Mirage had not been rogue procurement. It had been protection. Protection of what? I cross-referenced Nevada archive contents associated with the concealed access window, restricted operational files, contractor agreements, strategic asset relocations under emergency doctrine, and one designation repeated across multiple layers: IM directive continuance. Iron Mirage was not a singular operation, it was an extension, a preservation mechanism. My father had told the board it was a shield. He had not lied. He had simply omitted who it shielded. I expanded the decrypted fragments further. Blackthorn did not just log authentication origins. It recorded suppressed audit attempts. 3 weeks before my exposure submission, someone had attempted to access the same Nevada archive node under a different clearance. Blocked, logged, erased. The clearance ID was partially corrupted, but enough remained. Callahan. Again. He had been monitoring Nevada long before I detected the anomalies. which meant he had known Iron Mirage was vulnerable, which meant he had prepared a contingency. Me. I closed my eyes briefly. There are moments when betrayal arrives not as shock, but as confirmation. Growing up, my father never raised his voice when he corrected me. He rearranged circumstances instead. If I miscalculated, he changed the board. He was doing the same now. I opened a secure offline channel to a private storage node my mother once referenced, a redundant server located in Nevada but physically detached from main oversight. Blackthorn was not only a cipher, it was a vault key. The secondary fragments began assembling slowly, forged digital signatures layered over my clearance, manipulated timestamps backdated to align with my duty cycles, authorization injections from a legacy executive override account dormant for years. He had erased his visible trail. He had underestimated the dormant one. At 23:07 hours, my encrypted screen displayed a full reconstruction. Major Victor Callahan had engineered the concealed access to Nevada 48 hours before my briefing. He had used my security credentials to reroute and seal Iron Mirage archives. He had prepared the accusation after ensuring the logs would indict me. Not impulsive, calculated. I did not feel anger. I felt structure. He had believed national security justified internal deception. He had believed family loyalty would silence resistance. He had forgotten my mother designed systems that did not bend to loyalty. A knock sounded at the quarters door. Sharp, controlled. I minimized the screen and opened it. My father stood there. No escort, no visible tension. "Stand down, Arya," he said without greeting. His voice carried command, not volume. "You accessed Nevada," I replied. He did not deny it. "You're chasing something you don't understand." "I understand the logs." He stepped inside without invitation. "Iron Mirage prevents exposure of assets that would destabilize strategic positioning," he said. "You expose pieces without seeing the whole. You framed me. I protected the operation." He met my eyes evenly, and I protected our family legacy. Legacy. He believed the system required guardians willing to manipulate it quietly. He believed I would comply once shown the broader narrative. "Stand down," he repeated. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. Instead, I turned back to the desk and entered a single command. Blackthorn activation. He saw the screen shift. "You don't have clearance for that," he said. "It's not current clearance," I replied. "It's legacy." The cipher initiated its final protocol. Sealed archives within Nevada began unlocking through secondary nodes. Suppressed audit trails reconstructed. Executive override paths mapped transparently. Blackthorn did not accuse. It revealed. The algorithm forced the reconstructed evidence onto the central military server under automatic integrity broadcast, an internal failsafe my mother had built to prevent quiet coups. Data packets began transmitting. My father moved toward the terminal. Too late. Once activated, Blackthorn could not be intercepted without shutting down core infrastructure. "You're compromising national security," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm removing personal discretion from it." The transmission bar advanced steadily. 40%, 60, 90. Across the base network, sealed files became visible to oversight divisions beyond his influence. Iron Mirage's continuance directives, the executive override origin, the nested credential under my clearance. His name attached not by accusation, but by cryptographic alignment. The system would handle the rest. The transmission completed. Silence filled the quarters. My father stood very still. For the first time, certainty left his expression. He understood what Blackthorn meant. Exposure through process, not confrontation, not emotion, procedure. Within minutes, alerts would reach command oversight outside his chain. Within hours, containment would shift from me to him. He looked at me as if measuring something recalculated. "You chose the system over blood," he said quietly. I met his gaze. "I chose transparency." Footsteps approached down the corridor. Measured. Official. He straightened his uniform unconsciously. The knock came again. This time, not for me. The knock was not loud. It did not need to be. 2 officers from Strategic Oversight stood in the corridor when I opened the door. Their uniforms carried no visible tension, just authority without decoration. "Major Callahan," one of them said, not looking at me. "We need you to come with us." My father did not argue. He did not ask questions. He glanced once at the terminal behind me, where Blackthorn's final confirmation screen remained still and undeniable. Integrity broadcast complete. Archive transparency protocol executed. Executive override trace logged. He adjusted his cuffs with habitual precision. "This isn't over," he said, not as threat but as assessment. "It never was," I replied. He stepped into the corridor between them. They did not touch him. They did not need to. As they walked away, his posture remained straight, controlled, measured. He did not look back. The door closed softly. Silence returned to the quarters. I stood for a moment without moving. The system had begun its correction cycle. Internal oversight channels would be flooding with newly unlocked archives, cross-divisional auditors, legal review, procurement command. People who preferred quiet stability would now have to examine uncomfortable clarity. Iron Mirage had not collapsed yet, but its discretion had. Within an hour, my secure device vibrated. Administrative notice. Suspension status. Under reassessment. Another vibration. Internal Review Board convened under expanded jurisdiction. A third. Commandant request. Immediate debrief. I powered down the terminal before leaving. There was nothing more to activate. The walk back to the Academy building felt different than it had earlier that day. The air was colder, or perhaps clearer. Officers passed me in the corridor. Some avoided eye contact. Others held it longer than before. Rumors moved faster than formal reports. In the commandant's office, the lights were dimmer than the auditorium had been. No projection screen, no audience, just a long table. The commandant sat at the head. 2 oversight officers flanked him. A legal advisor occupied the far seat. My father was not present. "Captain Hale," the commandant began, "you activated a legacy fail-safe protocol." "Yes, sir." "You were aware it would override executive discretion." "Yes, sir." "You understood it would implicate a senior officer." "I understood it would reveal authentication origins." He studied me for a long moment. "You could have brought this to us privately." "I did," I said. He did not challenge that. The oversight officer slid a file across the table. The cover bore a new designation, Operation Iron Mirage, Internal Review. "We have verified the executive override trace," she said. "It originated from Major Callahan's preserved transitional clearance, nested beneath your authentication stream." No accusation in her tone, just fact. "The forged digital signatures?" I asked. "Confirmed manipulation," she replied. "Timestamp variants aligned with legacy protocol injection." The legal advisor leaned forward slightly. "You understand the political implications of exposing this through automatic broadcast?" "Yes." "And you chose not to confront Major Callahan before activation?" "I confronted the data." A pause settled in the room. The commandant exhaled slowly. "Iron Mirage," he said, "was designed to protect classified relocation initiatives during infrastructure reform. It was never authorized to bypass audit permanently." "No system should be," I replied. His gaze did not waver. "You are aware Major Callahan argued the exposure would destabilize strategic assets." "I am aware he believed that." "And you?" "I believe concealment becomes corruption when it depends on silence." The legal advisor closed the file. "Major Callahan is under formal arrest pending tribunal," she said evenly. The words landed without force. Arrest, not reassignment, not suspension, procedure. "Your name has been cleared of sabotage," the oversight officer added, "effective immediately." A document slid toward me. Reinstatement order. Full clearance restored. I read it once, then closed it. "Captain," the commandant said, his tone less formal now, "the board recommends your return to service following debrief." I held his gaze. "I decline." The room stilled. "You decline reinstatement?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "You understand your record is intact?" "I understand." "Your career trajectory remains intact," I repeated. He studied me carefully. "May I ask why?" Because blood had stood in a room full of witnesses and framed me with calm certainty. Because legacy had been weaponized. Because systems that require familial silence to survive are already unstable. Instead, I said, my service was to the structure, not the game. Silence again. The oversight officer nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Your resignation will be processed without prejudice," she said. "No ceremony, no applause, just documentation." I signed. The pen felt lighter than the badge had earlier that day. When I left the building, the academy grounds looked unchanged. Cadets still moved in formation, flags still lifted in controlled wind. Nothing outward reflected what had shifted internally. News of the arrest would circulate through official channels by morning. Public statements would be restrained, language carefully managed. Major Victor Callahan would face tribunal not for ambition, but for misuse of executive authority. Operation Iron Mirage would be dismantled through audit, not spectacle. Blackthorn's activation would likely be buried in footnotes of reform memos. That was enough. I returned to the temporary quarters one final time to collect my belongings. The room looked smaller now, or perhaps I did. On the desk, the terminal screen remained dark. My mother's cipher had done what it was designed to do, prevent internal coups. She had built a system that did not rely on trust. I closed the cabinet, lifted my bag, and stepped into the corridor. At the end of it, sunlight filtered through high windows, thin and steady. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel grief. I felt distance. Some games cannot be won without becoming what they require, and some honors are preserved only by stepping away. Outside, the Colorado sky stretched wide and indifferent. I walked toward the parking lot without looking back. The academy gates opened automatically as my vehicle approached. Behind me, a structure continued functioning. Ahead of me, there was no uniform, no clearance tier, no inherited legacy to defend, only choice. Have you ever realized that the greatest betrayal was not the accusation, but the assumption you would remain silent? If this story held you for a while, tell me what moment stayed with you. And if you'd like to continue walking through quiet power and deliberate resolve, stay with me. I did not leave Colorado immediately. Resignation requires processing, exit interviews, debrief documentation. The military prefers clean endings, even when the fracture beneath them is visible. For 48 hours, I moved through corridors I no longer belonged to. Officers who had avoided my eyes during suspension now nodded with restrained respect. Some paused as if to say something more. None did. Silence returns differently when your name has been cleared. It is no longer suspicion. It is recalculation. Major Victor Callahan's arrest had not been announced publicly yet, but within internal channels the shift was unmistakable. Access privileges revoked. Tribunal scheduled under sealed review. Executive override privileges permanently dissolved. Iron Mirage was being dissected, not loudly, methodically. Procurement auditors were already combing through Nevada's mirrored archives. The IM directive continuance files had been flagged for unauthorized expansion beyond reform parameters. The narrative was tightening around him the way he had intended it to tighten around me. Systems do not rage. They correct. On my final morning, I reported for formal debrief. The room was smaller than the auditorium where I had been accused. One table, 2 oversight officers, a recording device placed between us. State your full name and service number for the record. I did. Confirm you activated the Blackthorn Cipher protocol voluntarily. Yes. Confirm you understood it would initiate an integrity broadcast beyond your immediate chain of command. Yes. Did Major Callahan threaten you? No. Did he request compliance? Yes. How did you respond? I initiated the cipher. They did not ask what he meant by legacy. They did not ask about family. Procedure has no interest in emotion. When the recording ended, one of the officers closed the file slowly. You could have preserved your position, she said, not accusing, observing. At the cost of silence, I replied. She nodded once. There will be inquiries beyond this base, she added. External review committees. They may request your testimony. I will provide documentation. You do not intend to return to service? No. She studied me for a moment longer. You understand your career would have advanced? Yes, rapidly. I understand. She closed the folder. You're dismissed. The word carried a different weight this time. Outside, the sky was pale and cloudless. The academy flag shifted in steady wind. I walked past cadets in formation again, boots striking pavement in rhythm, voices calling cadence, structure, predictable, reassuring. It would continue without me. In the parking lot, I paused before opening my vehicle door. For years, my identity had been braided into uniform and clearance. Discipline had not just shaped me, it had steadied me. But discipline is not the same as attachment. I placed my bag in the passenger seat and drove toward the highway. My phone vibrated once. Unknown secure number. I answered without greeting. Aria. The voice was controlled, familiar. My father. They allowed this call, he said. Recorded. I assumed. A pause. They believe you acted out of principle. I did. They believe I acted out of control. You acted out of discretion. Silence moved between us. Not heavy, just present. Iron Mirage protected operations you never saw, he said quietly. Movements that prevented exposure of assets in hostile regions. And it concealed oversight, I replied. You think transparency is neutral. I think secrecy must answer to structure. He exhaled softly. You chose the system. I chose the boundary. Another pause. You could have come to me, he said. I did. You could have trusted me. I trusted the logs. The faintest edge entered his voice then. Blood is not procedural. No, I said. It is not. The line remained open for a moment longer. I built that clearance network, he said. I understood its vulnerabilities. So did she. He did not need me to clarify. My mother. You used her work against me, he said. I used her work as intended. A final silence settled. This will follow you, he said at last. The reputation, the narrative. I know. And you walk away? Yes. Why? Because winning inside a structure that required me to stand opposite my own blood was not victory. Because remaining would mean carrying a fracture that discipline could not repair. Because legacy, that depends on silence, is already unstable. Instead, I said, because sometimes the only way to preserve honor is to remove yourself from the field. He did not respond immediately. When he did, his voice had lost its command. You were always precise. I learned from you. The line disconnected. No farewell. The highway stretched ahead, long and open. By evening, official notice circulated internally. Major Victor Callahan, placed under tribunal for unauthorized executive override and procedural manipulation. Operation Iron Mirage, suspended pending structural reform. Captain Aria Hale, cleared of misconduct, resigned voluntarily. The summary was brief. It did not mention Blackthorn by name. It did not mention blood. It did not mention the quiet conversation in a temporary quarters room where legacy had shifted. Weeks later, I received a sealed envelope forwarded to my new address. No return signature. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. Every system leaves a trace, even when you think you've cleaned it. No accusation, no apology, just acknowledgement. I folded the paper once and placed it inside a drawer. Outside my window there was no academy, no formation drills, no oversight corridors, only ordinary light. I began consulting quietly for infrastructure audit firms that valued integrity over discretion. No uniform, no insignia, just systems, boundaries, transparency. Iron Mirage would eventually be rewritten in reform documentation. My father's tribunal would conclude with controlled language and limited public record. History often smooths its fractures. But I would remember the auditorium. The moment accusation was delivered calmly, the way certainty can look like authority, and the thin line between loyalty and silence. Have you ever been placed in a room where your integrity was questioned by someone who believed they owned it? If this ending felt quiet instead of triumphant, tell me why. And if you want to explore more stories where power shifts without spectacle, stay with me.